Debt really becomes unmanageable for a country when they are simply not able to pay it while at the same time improving the lives of their people. It doesn't mean they simply have enough dollars coming in to pay that debt, but it means that they can't pay the debt at the same time as providing health, education and welfare to the people of their country to realise their rights. The kind of regimes that took on that debt in the first place tended to be very illegitimate regimes, dictatorships and so on, buying weapons and other goods, products that were of no use whatsoever to their people. So now, 20, 30, 40 years after this debt was contracted, these countries are still repaying these debts, and it has formed a real crisis for their development, for them being able to realise the human rights of the people that they're supposed to serve. During the 1980s and 1990s, we had two lost decades of development where many countries in the world went backwards in terms of their human development indicators. We're talking here about things like literacy, the number of women and children that die during childbirth, the age at which you can expect to live in a given country. Countries went backwards, and they went backwards not because of natural disasters or anything like that, wars or anything like that, but because of this debt. We were working to ensure that the millennium, the year 2000, was a Jubilee, and Jubilee is a very old concept that goes back to the Old Testament. It was supposed to be a way of returning society to an equilibrium, so that the rich didn't go on getting richer and richer and more powerful, and the poor getting poorer and less powerful in societies. As a result of campaigning by activists right across the world, some of the debts of the poorest countries in the world was cancelled. However, that debt the debt that was cancelled was only cancelled for the very poorest countries in the world. There's much more that needs to be cancelled. There is much more debt out there which is still causing poverty directly in countries, which is still allowing, through its existence, institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to have enormous amounts of power over those economies and to really strangle democracy. One of the main problems with all of this debt is it's given the rich countries that lent the money enormous power over the poorer countries, the impoverished countries of the world. And that means they can and they have attached all manner of conditions. They've told countries they need to privatise things, including their water supply, their electricity supply, the basics. They've told countries to open up to international trade even when it's not good for them. They've told countries to privatise their banks and liberalise the money coming in and out of those countries. And this has had a very detrimental impact on the way that these countries have developed as well. So it isn't just the debt, it's the things that are attached, the policies that are attached to that debt. And even when the debt gets cancelled, those same policies are also attached to debt cancellation. So a country may on the one hand get debt cancellation, which is very good for it. On the other hand, it has to implement all sorts of policies which are detrimental to its development. So the power of debt is something that we need to bear in mind when we understand why the world works like it works. In countries like Tanzania, like Ghana, Zambia, Mali, the debt that's been cancelled has allowed those countries to completely rejuvenate their education and health systems. So Mali is one of the fortunate countries, in a sense, to receive debt cancellation, and that has meant that Mali has been able to spend far more on health and education than it was doing 10 years ago. And we expect that's going to have a real impact on the lives and livelihoods of people in that country and the way that Mali develops in the future. However, one of the problems that countries like Mali face is while the lending system still works in the way that it works, it's still very unjust and biased against the poorest in the world, they will reaccumulate debt, and they're already starting to do that. So it isn't simply one-off cancellation can never be enough. We need to change the system, we need to change the rules of the game so countries like Mali are able to exercise their democratic rights to have the kind of economy that suits them and their people, not the kind of economy that suits the richest part of the world. One of the really big problems is that we called for debt cancellation and we got a little bit of debt cancellation, and that's good. But what we didn't make any headway on at all is changing the system through which lending happens. So it is still possible, and it's still extremely frequent in the financial system that we've got, that very reckless and irresponsible lending is given all the time. We need to ensure that there are rules that make sure that the creditor, the lender, also bears responsibility for the loans they're giving. And that would mean that once the responsibility is shared, that there will be much less reckless and irresponsible lending that happens in the world. We also believe there should be a debt court, and a debt court would be able to adjudicate in a neutral space at an international level. We need to rebalance, essentially, the responsibilities and rights of the debtor and the creditor. We need to make political change. We need to change the rules by which finance is allowed to operate in this way. And people can stand up and take action and tell our government that we want a very different form of lending internationally, that we want a very different form of debt system, if you like. And if we do that, and if we speak with a loud enough voice, yeah, it's absolutely possible that people can change things.